Welcome to Vocab Unit 7. Your first root is ism, which means belief. There are many religions that end with ism, which makes sense because religions are belief systems. So I just wrote here for you Judaism and Catholicism to help you remember that root. Your first word is altruism, which is a noun, and it means unselfish concern for others. Altruism is generally talked about as something that you would dedicate your life to. So you wouldn't say that you were demonstrating altruism if you donated $10 to a charity. You would be demonstrating altruism if you founded a charity, or if you regularly gave large amounts of money to a charity, or if you dedicated your life to volunteer work. Would be ways to show altruism. Over here, I gave you two other forms of this word. So an altruist would be a person who demonstrates altruism. And altruistic, that one's an adjective, could be used to describe a person or a behavior. So you could say he is an altruist, or you could say he is an altruistic person, or you could say that was very altruistic behavior. Back over here, your synonyms are humanity and selflessness, and your antonyms are selfishness and egotism. Your sample sentence says he was always generous, but his greatest moments of altruism always came with the large donations that he would send to help with relief from natural disasters. Right, so you see their altruism associated with a large action, right, large donations. Your next word is jingoism, which is a noun, and it means aggressive, warlike patriotism. So if you think about this as patriotism, but much more intense and having a much more negative connotation, that's jingoism. Jingoist here is a noun that would refer to a person who demonstrates jingoism. Your synonyms are xenophobia, which means fear of outsiders. So jingoism, which is like that aggressive patriotism, often comes along with a fear of outsiders or hatred of outsiders. Nationalism and chauvinism are other synonyms. Helpful hints. This word carries a negative connotation. Being patriotic is a point of pride. Being jingoistic is being closed-minded and only thinking that your country is the best above all else. Your sample sentence says the political campaign rally quickly devolved from a discussion about policies into incoherent slogans about pro-American jingoism. So that would be a bad thing if that's what the rally devolved into. Your next root is odd, which means sound, and I think the best way to remember this is with the word auditory, which is one of your vocab words, going along with this root, but you already know that, right? So remember that has to do with sound. Your first word is audacious. It's an adjective. It's extremely daring, boldly in defiance of convention. The noun form of audacious is audacity. So you might say she showed audacity when she did this. Or I often associate the word audacity with someone who's upset about someone's audacity. So like, how dare you have the audacity to speak to me that way? Right? Then that would mean that someone is showing that kind of boldness, defiance of convention, not doing what's generally expected of you in the situation. So this person over here doing a handstand, depending on the context, could be showing great audacity, or could be proving that they're audacious. If you did a handstand in the middle of class, for example, right, that would be being audacious or audacious behavior. Your synonyms are bold and risky. Your antonyms are prudent and cautious. Your sample sentence, also about headstands. When Janelle began to stand on her head and curse at the administration during her student council speech, it might not have earned her too many votes, but it was certainly audacious. That is not what you were supposed to do during a student council speech. Your next word is auditory. It's an adjective, and it means pertaining to hearing. You have this deer over here with these big ears. That deer maybe has excellent auditory capabilities. Your synonyms are hearing and oral. And your sample sentence is, if not for the auditory testing at my middle school, I might not have ever noticed how poor my hearing had become. So auditory testing tests hearing. I also gave you down here, being an auditory learner means that you learn best when you hear things. And auditory imagery is imagery about sound, so that description of a sound in great detail. Your next root is ness, which means state of being. And your first word is boorishness, which is a noun, and it means crudeness or insensitivity. So you'll notice that what this root ness does is essentially take an adjective and make it into a noun. So boorish means crude. Boorishness is the state of being crude or the state of being boorish. So you'll actually see that ness on here as well. And you'll also see this root ity, which you should remember from previous units, which means quality of being. So that root ity essentially has the same purpose as ness, and that it's taking an adjective here, insensitive, and making it into a noun, insensitivity. Your synonyms, you'll see ity on both of these as well, vulgarity and incivility, and then as your antonyms, propriety and civility. Your helpful hint is Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. There's also this picture of this boorish person over here to help you. Your sample sentence is the season ticket holders at the opera were dismayed at the boorishness of the man seated in front of them. He never took off his trucker hat and ate Doritos during the show. So during an opera, typically an audience would be very quiet and respectful, so someone eating Doritos would be exhibiting boorish behavior. Your next word is furtiveness. So this one is the state of being furtive. And your definition is stealthiness or secretivity. And we're seeing those same suffixes at the end. Your synonyms for furtiveness are stealth and slyness. And your antonyms that should actually be candidness and frankness. And your sample sentence is, she could tell by his furtiveness that he wasn't telling her the complete story, so by his sneakiness. And you have a child over here who's being furtive by peeking out from behind some leaves. Your next root is ist, which means one who, and your first word is conformist. It's a noun, and if you think about that root, conformist would be one who conforms. And your definition is a person who unquestioningly follows a group. Your synonyms are follower and conventional. Your antonyms are non-traditional and individual. You may remember that con means with, so a conformist is one who forms with others, so one who kind of depends on others to help them form their identity. So over here, you might consider these people conformists because they all look exactly the same. Your sample sentence, Smith was a conformist, always reading the books that everyone else was reading, listening to popular music just so he wouldn't feel left out. Usually being a conformist is not considered a good thing. It's considered kind of putting aside your own identity to go along with a group. Your next word is revisionist. It's a noun, and it's an advocate of revising, especially with religious or political belief. So this is important. A revisionist is not someone who does a good job revising their papers. A revisionist is someone who tries to change history, basically. So who says, oh, I know the Bible's been interpreted like this for thousands of years, but I think what it really means is this. Or political figures who are dishonest and who say, oh no, I never said that, I said this. Or I was never in support of this policy when actually they were, but they're trying to revise history, essentially. Your synonyms are advocate and agitator. Your helpful hint is this often carries a negative connotation, suggesting someone who wants to alter the past to his own benefit. And your sample sentence is, the priests were tired of the status quo, and their more progressive beliefs about ancient religious rules caused some to see them as revisionists. So in these pictures over here, I have been a revisionist. This first picture is a picture of my family, and then I decided I wanted to revise history and say that my brother was there too. So I added him into this photograph, right? So if I was actually trying to convince people, yes, he was there, I would be a revisionist. And interestingly, doctoring photographs or changing photographs is a major way of trying to develop a new revisionist history. So there were, particularly in Soviet Russia, there were a large number of pictures where like people would mysteriously disappear from them. So there'd be a picture of Stalin and someone else, and then Stalin would no longer associate with that person, and that person would just be deleted from the photograph. So in that way, he was trying to revise history. Your next root is log or luk, which means speak. And your first word is eloquent. It's an adjective, and it means having the ability to speak fluently and gracefully. Hopefully this person over here giving a speech is an eloquent speaker, because that would make people want to listen to him or her. Your synonyms are articulate, fluent, and expressive. Your antonyms are dull and inarticulate. Your sample sentence is: when their son brought his fiancée over for dinner, they were impressed with the young woman's eloquence as she described her life goals and philosophy. So she was able to speak very clearly and articulately about her goals. Loquacious is your next word. It's an adjective, and it means excessively talkative. Your synonyms are garrulous, chatty, verbose, and fluent. Your antonyms are quiet, restrained, and subdued. Your sample sentence is: when she became nervous, she would always become loquacious. Sorry, that got cut off. Often restating the same thing 3 or 4 times in a row. All right, so there's your word there, loquacious. So if you're nervous and that makes you talk a lot, you could say that like you become loquacious when you're nervous. Or if you're just a person who likes to talk about, you could be loquacious. And the picture is a person talking over there. Your next root is intra. It means within. And your first word is intramural. It's an adjective, and it means involving only students at the same school. So these kids could be playing intramural sports over here. Intramural is often used with sports. And your synonyms are domestic or internal. Your antonyms are alien or formal. Your helpful hints: our annual volleyball tournament is an intramural event. It is open solely to BHS students. And your sample sentence is: BHS ought to have an intramural basketball league in which Burlington kids play against other Burlington kids. So in contrast, I don't know why they didn't give you this as an antonym actually. Extramural means between other schools. So most of the sports that we talk about at Burlington are extramural sports. And remembering this root extra, which means outside, as an opposite for intra might be helpful, right? Extra means outside, intra means within. Your next word is intrinsic, and it means belonging to a thing by its very nature. Your synonyms are inherent, essential, and fundamental, and your antonyms are extrinsic, external, or learned. Your helpful hint says a photograph is intrinsically worthless. The ink and paper that made it cost nearly nothing, but it can be immensely valuable on a personal level. So by its very nature, right, a photograph is ink and paper. However, we put value onto it, right? So the value that it has is not intrinsic, but rather it's something that people attribute to it. Your sample sentence is: the interviewer asked questions that he hoped would give insight into the applicant's intrinsic qualities, like their integrity, honesty, and self-esteem. So we might say that those are intrinsic qualities. They're something that you have or that you don't have, or that you have naturally. I put this picture here because it looks to me like these children have an intrinsic desire for learning, right? That it's something that they're very excited about learning right now. They're not motivated by grades, right? They're motivated because they intrinsically have a desire to learn. Your next root is leg or lect, which means read or choose. So you should remember both of those definitions because they are a little bit different. Your first word is legislation. It's a noun, and it means the act of making laws, or it can also refer specifically to a law or a body of laws. So in terms of the first definition, you could say that Congress is in charge of legislation, right? They're in charge of the act of making laws. And your second definition, you could say that piece of legislation, right? So a piece of legislation is a law. And your synonym is lawmaking. For that second definition, a law could also be a synonym. Your sample sentence is: despite the new legislation outlawing the use of Google Glass while driving, the number of accidents caused by the device remained high. So legislation here means law. You'll notice you can replace that with law and have the sentence still make sense, despite the new law outlawing, right? And your next word is legitimize. It's a verb and it means to make lawful or standard. So you often talk about this with something that previously has been seen as not really legitimate or not really legal, and then something legitimizes it. So a law could legitimize something, or someone with a lot of power, like a lot of political power, like the president, could kind of legitimize something by saying that it's okay. Or if a lot of people start doing something and it becomes conventional to do something, that could also be legitimized. So it could be kind of the legalization of something, or it could also just be to kind of become standard or to become legitimized over time. Your synonyms are legalize and authorize, and your antonyms are reject and discredit. Your sample sentence is when prohibition was lifted, it legitimized the sale of alcohol in the United States, so it made that legal. Over here, this picture is a picture of a marijuana plant. It says for medical use only. And recently, marijuana has become legitimized in more places. So in a more widespread way has been legitimate, or using marijuana for medical reasons has been legitimized. Using it for recreational purposes has also been legitimized, including in Massachusetts. Your next root is morph, which means form or shape. And your first word is metamorphosis, which is a complete change of form or substance, or a transformation. So this caterpillar over here undergoes a metamorphosis from caterpillar to butterfly. It changes completely. You can also have a little bit more of a metaphorical metamorphosis. So if you change a lot between being a child and being an adult, right? So you could say that, like, when you saw someone 20 years later, they had undergone a complete metamorphosis from their childhood self. Your synonyms are conversion or alteration, and your antonym is stagnation. Helpful hints: the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers changed their form completely when changing into a supreme fighting force. Right, so that word morph has kind of also come to mean like change, right? But it means change in form or shape. So you want to make sure you're associating morphing with, or morph with, form or shape versus that word change. Your sample sentence: the months out in the country caused a full metamorphosis in Isabella, who returned to the city looking younger, happier, and in better shape. So she changed significantly while out in the country. Your last word in this unit is amorphous, which is an adjective that means shapeless or having no structure or organization. You may remember an from Unit 1 means not or without, and with the adjective ending us, the word means without a shape. So that should be helpful in remembering morph too, right? Amorphous, without a shape. And your sample sentence is: the child pointed to the amorphous blob that he had drawn and asked his father, "Do you see what I made?" The father asked, "Is it a cat?" Right, so kids sometimes draw things that are amorphous. They don't really have a specific shape. And so over here is a jellyfish, which is kind of amorphous, or looks amorphous at least, and that its shape changes. It kind of looks like a blob. You can't really tell what the different body parts of the jellyfish are. Another thing to note with this word is the second definition: having no structure or organization can refer to something like a company. So an amorphous leadership structure, for example, would be one where there's no official president, but rather everyone takes on different leadership responsibilities. So normally you'd think about people being like at different ranks in the company, and there's like the higher bosses and the lower bosses. A company with an amorphous structure wouldn't have that, right? Everyone would kind of have different tasks that were considered equal, or sometimes one person would be in charge of one project and then they might be under someone else in a different project, right? So there isn't kind of that fixed structure or that fixed form.